All right.
Welcome, everyone, to the School Psychology Review special topic information session on School Psychology Futures Conference, Advancing Preparation, Practice, and Scholarship, Reimagining Student Success. I welcome you. My name is Shane Jimerson. I'm a professor here at UCSB and also editor of the School Psychology Review. I have the good fortune of collaborating with such incredibly talented and distinguished colleagues as Dr. Song, Dr. Hughes, Dr. Fenning, Dr. García Vázquez, as well as Dr. Radliff, and they'll be sharing information here today. But we want to hopefully provide you with some information that will help orient you to encourage you and inform you about preparing and possibly submitting papers to this special topic section. And feel free to share information on social media. We'll also be recording this session so that it will be featured on the School Psychology YouTube channel. All right, so we'll go ahead to the next slide. So this special topic section is one of many that we have been featuring in School Psychology Review. Those of you that have some familiarity with the journal will recognize that we've been focusing on specific topics that are important for the future of school psychology and to inform the field of school psychology. This is yet another one here, the most recent, focusing on information related to the Futures Conference, which our colleagues will share a lot of great details here in just a few moments. It's important to note that this is an open call for papers, such that we are encouraging all colleagues to consider submitting the paper, unlike some other instances where some journals will feature a special issue that is sort of either by invitation or selection only. It's important to highlight that this is an open call for papers, and all folks are encouraged to consider, from students to practitioners to faculty and other folks in related and allied fields. And also, it's important to note that all of the papers submitted do go through a triple anonymous peer review process. That's important to us to advance equity and anonymity in the process, such that the authors, the action editors, as well as the reviewers are not aware of who each other are. And we've been using this process now for the past 4 years in School Psychology Review. So again, it will be all papers going through a triple anonymous peer review system. And there's a lot of details that are featured in the information that we've been broadcasting via email and also available on the websites, the respective websites. And our colleagues now will share some information, and we look forward to your submissions. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Song. So we'll let each of our colleagues introduce themselves briefly and share a little bit of information about themselves, as well as their active involvement with the Futures Conference, to provide some context and positionality. And so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Song.
Thanks, Shane. Hello, everybody. I'm Sam Song at San Diego State University. I'm the director of the School Psych program here. I'm one of the co-chairs for the Futures Conference this year, or a couple of years. It's been a couple of years. And I've been mostly involved with the advocacy work group, and working with my colleagues there, Tara Rains, Jean Cash, Marie Tanaka, specifically. And yeah, other than that, I think let's hand it over to Tammy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Hughes from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. Go Steelers. And I'm a co-chair with Sam for the Futures Conference these last cycle. And most of the work that we've been focused on, which includes Dr. Jimerson, Dr. Vázquez, Dr. Hennington, and myself, has been focused on expanding our view of the science and scholarship that school psychologists not only publish, but then have access to in the field. Pam, you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I live in the Windy City, but today it's a rainy city. I'm at Loyola University, Chicago. I've been a professor here for a really long time, and now I've dabbled in a little administrative work. But I think my really true love is research and looking at systems and structures, particularly with respect to racial bias and disproportionality in school discipline and entry to juvenile justice system. On the futures group, the planning group, I've been really super fortunate to work along with the colleagues you see presenting here, as well as colleagues like Cliff had. And my focus has been thinking through practice and applications of systems of oppression in terms of hearing from practitioners and their viewpoints and perspectives. So I will kick it over to Dr. Vázquez.
Good morning, everyone. Enedina García Vázquez, most refer to me by Vázquez. I'm at the University of Iowa. I am working there as a clinical professor and co-coordinating the school psychology programs there. And my participation in the Futures Conference, as Tammy pointed out, was to assist with one of our pillars, science and scholarship. And we've been working together to bring in the speakers and, guide the direction of science and scholarship. One of the things I wanted to point out is that a big piece of what we presented was related to ethics and research to help us become more inclusive and make sure that even before we do the research, we're thinking about how we're being inclusive. Thank you. Kisha.
All right, thank you, Enedina. I am Kisha Radliff. I'm an associate professor at The Ohio State University. With the Futures Conference, I participated with Pam in the practice group, and we looked at what are ways that we engage in practice that contribute to oppression and systemic oppression, as well as what are the ways that we can combat that. And so what are the practices we can engage in to lift up all students.
So for today, our agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to talk a little bit about the context of the Futures Conference and the special topic, importance, purpose, types of manuscripts, due dates, and have plenty of room for or time for Q&A. So.
All right, I'll kick us off. While the field has been discussing practices in school psychology since the 1954 Thayer's Conference, many of our conversations have been internal to the field and thinking about ourselves and our professional practices. This Futures Conference is different because we took an external focus to look at broader social inequities. And so when you look at the slide here, what we're really trying to focus on is for us to imagine a world where every kid goes to school and every kid is successful there, and what school psychology can contribute to such a world. We're using a social justice lens. That means to inform all of the practices, the science, the scholarship, policy, advocacy, which we'll discuss today, but using the social justice lens as a way to conceptualize the future of school psychology. You'll see the conference itself is a year long, which is very different in terms of how many people can access it, and also our intentional process of asking people to think through and reflect upon some of the presentations that we have. You see the QR code there. You can log in anytime. All of the presentations we have, the webinars, are cataloged there. There's also readings for you. So when you're thinking about this special issue and you're preparing and you would like to say, I wonder what this has been happening, what folks have been talking about, it's all there for you to reflect on.
Okay, so how does this play out, right, when we look at systems of structures and oppression? So I'm going to briefly describe some of the pillars, which will be the basis for the submission, general topics. So the first one has to do with leadership. How do we emerge as leaders in the field of school psychology, science, and scholarship? And Enedina did, I think, a beautiful job of describing research and scholarship and how we focus on, even from our conceptualization in terms of being affirming and inclusive practice. Kisha mentioned, how do we work with practitioners to really enact socially justice practices to promote equity in the work that we do. And this idea of education and lifelong learning, like we're never there, even if we've been at this for a very long time. So how do we advance our continuing professional development, knowledge, skills, and dispositions in terms of the work we do, regardless of the role we happen to find ourselves in. And then the idea of workforce development, this idea of, how do we really enact our efforts? We're talking about the future of the field of school psychology. So it's really this future workforce development to have well-trained school psychologists that are really able to meet and work with individuals from diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds. And then the idea Sam spoke of earlier around advocacy, right? His work and the team's work that he collaborated with around systems change, right? The broad system change around advocacy at multiple levels that transcends education, mental health, and other systems. So I'll kick it off to the next person.
That might be me. In order to keep things cohesive and together, we obviously had a theme for the conference, but we also wanted to make sure that we figured out ways to be visible and to make what we were doing relevant to today. And part of that was driving equitable and liberatory mental health, education, and culturally affirming schools for all of our kids and children, youth, and families. And so we had three major questions, these big questions that you see here, that sort of tied us together so that we were in each of the pillars addressing these particular questions. Number one is how we would ensure the future of school psychology continues or is socially responsive and hopefully helping to address the impact of health, social, emotional, and educational disparities on children and youth and families, and how will our work mitigate systemic and structural inequities, and how that work will reduce the vast and increasing disparities in our society. So our whole goal again was to make sure that we were having very equitable driving force with all of the presentations that we prepared and around the pillars that Pam just presented on.
Kisha?
Yep, that's me. All right. So on this slide, it talks about the types of manuscripts that are encouraged to be submitted. So in that first section, so it will papers that are empirically evidence-based or present empirical evidence, those are the ones that will be prioritized, as well as if they focus on one or more of the Futures Conference pillars. So those were the ones that Pamela discussed previously. So make sure to consider that as you're writing your paper. How does this connect with one or more of those pillars? Every submission is going to be processed through triple anonymous peer review. So there will be very intentional peer review looking for the things that align with the Futures Conference and what is discussed by Pam as well as Tammy, Sam, and Enedina. The deadline, and this is very important to keep in mind, for the receipt of submissions is October 1st of this year. So you have some time. If you have questions, definitely reach out. If you're not sure if your article might fit, feel free to send it in and ask for feedback as to that. And make sure you go to the School Futures Conference website. I think that would be very helpful in helping you determine how your paper might align with the pillars.
Great. Thank you. So just elaboration on the previous slide in terms of the variety of manuscripts. So we're really open to all types, qualitative, quantitative, mixed method investigations, systematic research reviews, including meta-analyses, scoping reviews, database policy papers, and conceptual papers.
Yes, and it's important to recognize that, as with most of the journals, the School Psych Review has this online submission portal. As many of you are aware, the School Psych Review Journal is published through a partnership of the National Association of School Psychologists in partnership with Taylor and Francis. So you can see that the tnfonline.com/USPR is the way to link there. There's information about the aims and the scope and of the journal, as well as instructions for the authors. And you're welcome to reach out if you have other questions to any of us, and especially our guest editors who are speaking today, presenting information, and ultimately responsible for managing each of these papers through the review process. So you're welcome to reach out and ask additional questions. And as Dr. Radliff had mentioned, tending to the information that's on the Futures Conference website is a really great way to be certain that you're linking the contents of your paper, your submission, to at least one or more of the pillars, those 6 pillars that were discussed in the presentation today. And also, I've put in a few links to a couple of items that will probably be of interest to some of you. I know some of you have already accessed these materials. Importantly, there is a paper already featured in School Psychology Review that does highlight Futures Conference content. And this is a paper that was from the inaugural presentation by Dr. Celeste Malone on moving school psychology beyond the clouds of injustice, a blue sky discussion. And that presentation was then prepared as a journal article and submitted, reviewed, and has already been featured in the most recent issue of School Psych Review. And so for those of you who are considering preparing a paper for submission to this special topic section, we encourage you to check out that particular article and read through it, see what information might resonate, might make sense, might be linked to some of the projects, papers that you're focused on in your work. And then also I did include that, we just wanted to highlight that these efforts of our colleagues collaboratively through the School Psychology Futures Conference are indeed very consistent with the commitments of School Psychology Review, particularly in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the field of school psychology. And I also put in the chat a link to a collaborative paper by the leadership team that specifically focuses on advancing DEI and school psychology, and really encouraging colleagues to be the change, which builds on some of the other articles or sets the foundation for some of the other articles that have been featured across the past few years. So that's also available in the link there. And I think those are the key pieces of information to highlight and share. I guess the only other thing to note is that as you log on to submit a paper, it will simply ask you for your name and your email address to set up an account if you don't already have one within the Scholar One system. And then once you are logged in there with an account, then it has you submit the paper in pieces where you've got your abstract, you've got the contents, including the references and the tables. And again, these are de-identified materials such that they will be going through that triple anonymous peer review system. And the other thing is to make sure to include your author's information, your co-author's information in addition to your own once you're submitting that paper, and then it will send you a confirmation of the submission, and then it will go into our action editors pool. The action editors will identify and invite reviewers, members of the editorial review board, which includes practitioners as well as faculty. In addition to, we do have student editorial board members as well. And so you could anticipate then receiving feedback, some comments, and hopefully being constructive and kind and helpful, regardless of the disposition of the ultimate decision, receiving those comments from the action editors as well as the reviewers. So just to kind of talk through that process so that folks know what to anticipate as you go into that portal, and then what would be forthcoming. So I think those are the key details there, Sam.
Great, thanks, Shane. All right, so now's the time that I'm thinking most of you came for is the Q&A part. So open questions, feel free to unmute yourself and or put them in the chat. If my colleagues can help me monitor in the chat, that'd be great. Let's see.
While we're waiting for questions, it might just be good to again highlight that it's really open to the vast range of possible types of papers, as Dr. Song was describing previously. So those of you that are thinking about having thought papers, conceptual papers, theoretical, as well as we're encouraging, of course, those with empirical work and those that can involve, mixed methodology, single subject, qualitative, quantitative, really the vast expanse of all types of scholarship is encouraged. So I just wanted to reiterate that point. I know Dr. Song had highlighted that on a previous slide, as we're seeing if any folks had particular questions they're thinking about at this juncture.
Dr. Jimerson, perhaps people might want to reach out and ask questions. We've had several questions sent to us about, is this a topic that makes sense, and how do we link it back to the Futures Conference, and sort of the range, the broad range of the couple of articles we've already, or the couple of submission requests that we've already gotten. And I just wanted to highlight that we are absolutely open to questions for people seeking to link their work. Sometimes there are multiple connections. Perhaps you have, both a practice issue or a practice question that's also related to advocacy, or a science question that's also related to practice, or in any combination. But we've been very open to people sending us questions, asking us about links. Since all of us were involved in the Futures Conference development, we are skilled and able to point people to the direction of where resources are located on the website, particular articles that might resonate or be in line with where they were going. And so we're happy to do that kind of legwork, that kind of connecting things together. I noticed a couple of folks that asked us questions were newer assistant professors, and we're just sort of trying to understand the lay of the land, and we absolutely welcome that kind of inquiry, and are looking forward to matching people with their interests, and how that can be part of and driving the way we think about the future of school psychology. This really is an attempt to reimagine how we think about the field. We all sort of know what we do, and we know about training, and we know about continuing education, but reimagining a world where everybody can benefit and everybody can learn. And I think that's what Celeste's article is about, is what if we didn't have barriers? Let's think about that. And so we want to encourage that kind of thinking, and perhaps that's what we might mean as conceptual even, and grounded in theory.
Yeah, those are excellent points, Dr. Hughes. And it reminds me of one of the questions. There might be a few that we recall that could be helpful to others. Oftentimes it's the case that if someone asks a question, other folks might not have thought of it yet, or just hadn't had the courage to send an email or put it in the chat. But one of those was, did you need to participate in the Futures Conference in order to prepare a submission for a paper? And the short answer there is no, it was not a requirement. It's not a prerequisite to have participated. Clearly, the information that we've provided, Dr. Hughes shared the fabulous QR code. We've put in the link to the School Psychology Futures Conference, which is pretty much just the name right there. So it's easy to locate. If you do a Google search, I think you'll locate it. And you can find a lot of information and materials and the presentations and the documents that are right there. And so whether or not you've participated in the Futures Conference over the past couple of years, or whether you've just kind of been hearing about it recently, it's wide open to all folks to consider preparing and submitting a paper. And related also to what Dr. Hughes was describing about reimagining and seeing the future and such of the field, that's really the intent of the Futures Conference, right? And so in the chat, I did put a preceding paper that was featured in School Psychology Review as a special topic section that was guest edited by Dr. Sullivan and Dr. Worrell, who focused on reconceptualizing school psychology for the 21st century. And it talks about the future of school psychology in the United States. That linkage is in there. And there's a great assortment of articles that are addressing these topics. Those could also possibly be informative and inspiring for the types of articles that you might want to feature now, because again, those articles were all published in 2022, which means ostensibly those are being reviewed from about 2020, 2021 in order to get into the finally ultimately be accepted, selected, and then go through the print production process. So importantly, those were articles now that are probably, at least 2 to 3 years old, and they might serve as some inspiration. There's one in particular, as I recall, that was featured in that special topic section that I'll put in the chat. And that was by Dr. Sabnis and Dr. Proctor, that also had focused, or even earlier than that, that focused on use of critical theory to develop conceptual framework for critical school psychology. So again, just highlighting that there's some of these papers out there that you could take a look at to see along the lines of the thoughts that you're exploring, the projects that you're working on, all focused, as Dr. Hughes was saying, on pushing towards the future and what will practice, what will scholarship, what will the science, what will policies look like relevant to the field of school psychology. Yeah, so those are just a few more resources.
And I just like to reiterate that those of us here presenting, you might feel like, oh my God, I can't email this person or whatever. Like, don't be shy. Like any of us like talking today, we all started somewhere, right? So like we all had somebody to like talk or float ideas past. So please don't be shy in reaching out to any of us with your ideas. And because the idea here is the special series can be also a springboard for other conversations when we're thinking about the future. And if you're newer to the field or even not, right, you're part of the future of school psychology. So please don't be shy and don't we're all, I think, very approachable. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd reiterate that as well. Happy to chat phone as well, Zoom. I also wanted to reiterate and what was said is that the Futures Conference is still going on technically in terms of it's winding down, but it's free registration. So we want to we're asking for registration so that we could keep in touch with folks in terms of new developments. But feel free to register and then watch these webinars. They're they're not that long. They're about an hour and a half less. And they also have resources there. And so I do think that it'd be useful in the preparation. So while it wasn't a requirement to participate in some of those activities, it is a hybrid conference. So technically speaking, you can still participate now.
I had a quick question. For those of you that have done these special issues before, do you have any tips or suggestions on how we can incorporate more students and students' voices in these articles?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Dr. Vasquez. And as I mentioned previously, we've continued to have a strong commitment towards including students in the process at all levels, right? So I believe School Psychology Review is the only journal that has a student editorial board infrastructure that's established. And that's been something that we just actually renewed because, as it were, some students graduate and then they become members of our editorial board. But we just renewed with another about 30 additional students who have joined on just this academic year as we're entering into the last couple of years of the current SPR leadership team. So it is important to recognize that we have a strong commitment to students. In fact, as Dr. Hughes, I think, was suggesting, students are the future by definition and default, and we embrace fully the students and our early career colleagues and all across the board. And absolutely, this is including practitioners as well as faculty and folks that are doing both and all sorts of diverse roles and responsibilities. So absolutely, as Dr. Hughes indicated in the chat. And so to your point, Dr. Vázquez, in terms of what this means for students participating as authors on these various papers, I'll share this. There have been instances where a paper was sole authored by a student and submitted and went through the review process, again, triple anonymous, independent peer review, and accepted for publication. And one of those articles even became a finalist for Article of the Year. This was just in the last couple of years. And so that's incredible in terms of, we're not requiring individuals to do it on their own, but in that instance, that person had done all the good work, the scholarship, et cetera. Now, it's more common, of course, as you know, Dr. Vázquez, to be collaborating on papers as a co-author. And it can be a project that a particular student had worked on, say for their master's project, for instance. I know in the field of school psychology, there are a lot more folks doing master's projects than doctoral dissertations, just as a function of sheer numbers and volume. And so if you're someone out there who is a practicing school psychologist or a student who maybe had done a master's project during your graduate work that seems spot on to addressing one or more of these pillars and thinking about informing the future of school psychology, then we would welcome those submissions. A lot of times, folks are possibly intimidated by the preparation, submission, making certain that everything is in the right format process. And that's why I mentioned earlier that there's instructions and guidelines for authors that are available on the SPR website. That does include some links to videos and other supports. On the School Psychology Review YouTube channel, which is where we will also feature this video, we do have some additional information, some pro tips for preparing manuscripts and submitting manuscripts. And so we also encourage those of you that might be interested, either as students or just individuals who have not prepared a lot of papers for journals, to consider those additional resources that are available either through the School Psychology Review website, through Taylor and Francis, or on the School Psychology Review YouTube channel, and that collaboration that can make these things possible, right? So sometimes collaborating with colleagues, other faculty members, and or other students. And sometimes they're at your university where you had attended, but sometimes it's other folks who have a shared interest. Maybe you've met through some of your interest groups or through some of the conferences or that sort of thing. So there's certainly tremendous opportunities for graduate students as well as early career colleagues to be engaged here, to get support, to help prepare those papers and submit those papers and that sort of thing. There was one more thought I had in terms of in fact, most papers submitted to School Psychology Review, most papers we have found include one or more students. And so this is also an important note, is that we recognize this. And in fact, our leadership team, we know it's so important in providing the constructive, high quality, and timely feedback in terms of the reviews and the decision correspondence, that one of the messages that we've maintained as a touchstone throughout is that there's typically always a student involved as a co-author. This could be, for that person, the first professional paper they've ever submitted. And it could be that that individual is the lead author, the corresponding author. Whatever that is, it's super important to recognize that when we're crafting the decision letter and when our reviewers are preparing the comments, they need to be within the context of recognizing that for some persons, this is their first paper, their first time ever receiving feedback. And for someone else, it could be their 150th, right? So we need to recognize that. So to Dr. Vasquez's point, it is super important to recognize that students do contribute a tremendous amount through the editorial review process, through the authorship, co-authorship of papers, sometimes even independently on their own, but more commonly among a group of co-authors, and that we welcome. And certainly, as Dr. Hughes said, back to the point, is that the students are the future of the field, and this is good news. And that's why we want to encourage and certainly embrace your contributions to this special topic section. Yeah, excellent question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's other questions that have come up for any of us in those various emails. I think that's another one that was noted there that Dr. Vasquez mentioned. We talked about the one whether you needed to have previously participated in the Futures Conference. I can just say that the general length guidelines, as you look into those author instructions and such, school psychology review, because sometimes people ask about how long does the paper either need to be or have to be, or what's the limit, you know, so that question is phrased in like 3 to 5 different ways. And generally speaking, we're looking for papers that are fully all-inclusive at about 35 pages. That's double-spaced, okay, APA style format, including the references, including the tables, including the figures, including everything, all-inclusive. About 35 pages is our typical page limit. But we do want to recognize that in some instances, the nature of the scholarship is expansive beyond 35 pages. So we do provide an option for authors to communicate in their cover letter if they're attempting to provide a rationale or a justification for their paper exceeding the 35 pages. So that is permissible. And also give you another pro tip that you would see in the instructions to authors, which is you can also include supplementary online materials, which are not counted as part of the 35 pages, okay? That's important because some scholarships, some efforts, the extensive nature of the appendices or some of their methods or some of the details that would expand the paper well beyond 35, 40, even 50 pages, that material can be submitted with the paper, identified as supplementary online material, and that information will be tethered digitally to the manuscript. So it's not like it's not included, it's just that it's there as a link. And so sometimes if you're struggling, like those of you that might have written a 100-page thesis project, right? Whether that was a master's project or whether that was a dissertation project, you can sometimes have a lot of information that goes beyond the scope of what would be appropriate to synthesize and summarize in a brief journal article. However, you can consider putting that into the supplementary online materials as a submission. And just so you know, the reviewers also do review the supplementary online materials. So it's not like people just get to put whatever they're thinking into that section, right? It's an important part. It is peer reviewed. But I do mention that in case any particular colleagues are thinking about the length of the paper and their work possibly expanding beyond that. And there's probably 2 usual suspects that I see most commonly that have a need for either supplementary online or a little bit more space. And those 2 are the folks that are doing like large-scale systematic reviews, meta-analyses that are comprehensive in scope, and sometimes just one table could end up taking up 5 pages, right? Because they're summarizing all the important details of those studies and such. And so you could see with a few tables, all of a sudden you have very little space to fit the contents. Another example is our colleagues who are doing high quality qualitative scholarship or mixed method designs that include both qualitative and quantitative, because in some instances, the nature of the analyses and the summary of information does extend beyond the scope of the 35 pages. So that would be another just concrete example of where we see most commonly folks either asking for requesting that in the cover letter to when you submit, you include a cover letter to the editor, just generally describing the information that's in your paper. And if you're requesting a exception for review beyond the 35-page limit, that would be where you would also make those comments. And then now that I've given you this pro tip on possibly using supplementary online materials, which is sometimes a paper was initially submitted and it's really long and the authors did not attend to the 35-page limit. And so sometimes in our response to those authors, we will indicate that we want to direct your attention to the possibility of using some of these contents in a supplementary online format. And so it's even better if you know about this before and you're able to submit it with that, rather than us having to kind of go back and forth to try to get it there subsequently. And again, looking across the board here, our colleagues have a lot of experience with this. I know Dr. Fenning shaking her head in agreement. She's been immersed in this. I know many of our colleagues have navigated this balance of wanting things to be succinct, wanting them to be precise and to the point, but also recognizing that the complexities of some of these topics lend themselves or warrant additional expansive space, whether it's within the text or whether it's on supplementary online materials. Yeah, so that's one that I was thinking of that sometimes comes up, is what's the page limits, Anyone else think of other things that are coming up or in your experiences have been super important as you've been, reviewing papers or serving as an action editor that could help our colleagues in preparing papers to submit for this special topic section? And then if any of our colleagues had particular topics that they're thinking of, you're welcome to put it into the chat and or speak up if you'd prefer to do that, but I think folks can also share in the chat if there are any particular topics or questions. We'll give it a few minutes and see if any of us think of any other items that could be helpful for potential colleagues submitting papers. I know one more that I just came to mind is about whether you need to be a school psychologist or in the field of school psychology. And the answer there is no. It is an interdisciplinary emphasis, an interdisciplinary journal. It's an applied science. And certainly for those who are colleagues out there who focus on special education, developmental psychology, child psychopathology, child clinical psychology, pediatric psychology, the educational psychology, counseling psychology, the list could go on and on and on, right? Because as school psychology is certainly an applied developmental science, we're looking for those insights from practitioners across the board, including colleagues from other disciplines and such. So we want to make that point clear as well, in case some of you watching this video are trying to think about the future of school psychology and you're thinking about it from a lens that may not be as a person who is prepared as a school psychologist or working as a school psychologist or focused on the preparation of school psychologists. We're taking a strong emphasis on interdisciplinary scholarship, and we understand that ultimately school psychologists are out there facing big challenges, trying to address the big problems. And in order to be successful, we need to embrace those interdisciplinary perspectives. And we benefit tremendously from our colleagues, interdisciplinary colleagues, multidisciplinary colleagues, in order to address these really big, complex challenges that each of us are navigating in our work in the field of school psychology. So I want to make certain that folks are recognizing that you're welcome to submit to the special topics section, even if you are not a school psychologist or prepared as or preparing such, but also encourage those interdisciplinary collaborations. If you're someone who's been working as a school psychologist and you have these ideas, it can be very valuable to get additional perspective from interdisciplinary colleagues. How does that happen? Invite them to be a co-author on the paper, and then you'll get their ideas, you'll get their input. I'm certain they'll bring additional literature, additional diverse perspectives to the table. So that's a question that sometimes has come up, and just want to encourage folks to recognize the importance of the interdisciplinary contributions, and certainly encourage you to collaborate with colleagues if you are a school psychologist, and or submit if you're not a school psychologist. That's great too. Any other things that you've thought of, Dr. Song, or anyone else have any other ones that are kind of coming front of mind to help our colleagues preparing for submissions to the special topic section?
Nothing unique. I think that was a good question you just did, Shane. That was a common one. I would just say feel free, feel free to write about what you're passionate about, and don't be afraid of disrupting status quo or anything with your ideas or your scholarship or research. I think that's kind of what we're looking for to advance our field forward. And so I just wanted to say that on a personal level. Don't be shy. It's a time to be brave and to let the folks who really haven't been heard as much, either due to usually in our field, at least in this area, it's usually because you're a student or a practitioner, in addition to obviously other identities that are marginalized, prioritized, of course. But I think that we do want to hear the future of our field. So.
Absolutely. And Dr. Song, that made me think of one more question that sometimes has come up, is whether or not you need to focus on the United States or not. And the School Psych Futures Conference has purposely had an international emphasis. We've had an international participation throughout the process. And so whether or not you're a school psychologist or allied colleague in the United States or any country throughout the world, we also welcome submissions to this special topic section. Again, emphasizing the diversity and the diverse views of individuals, cultures, context. There's tremendous value of incorporating both U.S. national as well as international perspectives and thinking about the future of school psychology.
All right, last call for questions. Any comments from the field, from the audience? Anyone want to say anything? What makes you excited or?
Thank you, Dr. McKinney. I see the post in the chat there. Yes, grateful for your participation, contributions as well. And as we're wrapping it up, Dr. Song, I just did want to say thank you to each of our colleagues, both those who are participating as well as those who are watching the video after the time together, as well as, the individuals who have been providing the leadership and the good work related to the 6 pillars at the local level, in the schools, at our universities, in our collaborative projects. Tremendously important, inspiring, informative, and also thinking about these projects, not just locally, but also nationally and internationally, as we notice. So I just wanted to give a shout out to all of our fabulous colleagues, and then of course recognize our guest editors here who are contributing tremendously, both in terms of their leadership and contributions to the respective school psychology organizations in the field, as well as within the School Psych Futures Conference, which Dr. Song and Dr. Hughes described has been going on for multiple years, and the planning even began a year before that. So you can understand the extensive contributions and efforts, and as well as their ongoing commitment serving as guest editors for School Psychology Review for this important topic, which we're hoping to receive many, many submissions, and hoping that there will be many, many that meet the mark, because with these special topic sections, we're not limited to just publishing 3 or 4 or 5 papers. We can accept those papers that are meeting the mark and making the advancements and contributions. That's another advantage of doing special topic sections rather than special issues, because special issues typically limited to whatever papers you can fit into the one particular issue. However, we're doing special topic sections. We're focusing on these areas of importance and emphasis. So we're really grateful for our colleagues that are here today, especially our colleagues who are providing the leadership with the SP Futures special topic section forthcoming. And remember, October 1st is the due date. You're welcome to submit it before then. And if you have comments or questions, feel free to follow up, as folks have mentioned. But I'll turn it over to Dr. Song for any other closing comments.
No, that's it. Thank you all very much for coming, and hopefully be in. Stop.